I like my fun color changing Starbucks cup. Isn't that fun? Hi friends, it's Jordan and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing a video that, why do I always do this at the start of videos? Like I really need to knock that off. Today we're going to be doing the mid-year Freakout book tag, which is the tag I have done every year for the last couple of years. This year is particularly challenging for me, and I know it's a little late. It's August and I should have done this back in June. So I haven't read anything. Like I've read maybe 10 to 12 books this year, like at the point of when I'm doing this tag, because even though it's August, I'm only doing this through like what I've read in June to keep it a mid-year book Freakout tag. I had not read that much. I mean, I still haven't read that much, but like at that point I hadn't read enough to like answer these questions adequately. I felt that it was a challenge to answer these questions because I just haven't read enough things to pick from. I tried my best to answer these questions and to only use one book per question, like one book one time, but it was a challenge. I'm just gonna throw that out there. Let me get out of my system. I need to burp. Oh, there's a bug in my cup, just killed it. Without further ado, let's get into the mid-year Freakout book tag for 2021. Question number one is the best book you've read so far this year. My favorite book so far this year, I'm gonna pick the wrong side because I always do. We're gonna commit to this side. I'm gonna hate it later probably because I always pick the wrong side. My favorite book of the year so far is Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. This is like one of the very first books I read this year. We read this for House Salt Book Club. I think this was our January pick, so I really haven't had much of an upswing since. I hit really high very early on and it's been a little bit of a disappointment since, but that's fine. This is a wonderful urban fantasy novel about Arthurian legends. That came out really weird. She gets accepted to an early college program. While she's there, she gets sucked into this like underground secret society that is revolving around the Arthurian legends and like the Knights of the Round Table and Lancelot, and there's bloodlines involved, and she finds out that like her mother's death, I think she died in a car crash, may be linked or tied into the secret society. I'm so excited for the sequel. I think it's gonna be phenomenal. I absolutely loved this. It was just the best thing I read this year. It had such smart commentary on colonialism and race in the US. It was just so seamlessly and perfectly interwoven into this storyline about Arthur, and I loved every minute of this. The second question is the best sequel you've read so far this year. I don't think I've read very many sequels this year, but I think my favorite would have to be Kingdom of Ash by Sarah J. Maas. And I know that this is like such a cliche answer, for me at least, but this is the final book in the Throne of Glass series, and if you've been on my channel with me for any length of time, then this has been a huge part of like my booktube journey. I have done so much with this series and I've really like grown with this series. It's been something that's been a really long-standing staple on my channel, and so the fact that I finished it this year just felt like the end of an era. It could have been the end of an era depending on if you consider an era that I read this series. Anyway, it was the end of an era. I felt like a chapter closed, and ha ha ha, so punny. I can't not say that this wasn't like the best sequel I've read so far this year because it just wrapped up the series so well in my opinion. I was very satisfied and happy with what happened. I would have liked a little more from a certain couple that I have a unreasonable obsession with, but aside from that, I was very pleased with what I read, and I can't wait to like now explore her other books that I've been avoiding. It just was such a formidable, foundational part of my reading. I've learned so much about my reading tastes from this series. I think this would have to be the best sequel I read so far this year. Question number one that I really want to read and haven't gotten around to yet, but I actually started it and never continued, is A Vow So Bold and Deadly by Bridget Kemmerer. I started this book at some point this year and then I put it down and I just never went back to it. I don't know for what reason I put it down. I love this series. This is the third and final book like I mentioned. It's this really fun urban fantasy like Beauty and the Beast retelling about this girl from DC who happens upon a man trying to abduct a young woman off of the street, and she intervenes and gets abducted instead, and they get whisked away to a parallel universe in which she needs to help save the kingdom because the prince there needs to marry someone, and she was the one that got taken, and she's not interested in marriage, and the prince really doesn't want to turn into a beast anymore. So they have a bit of an issue. It has fantastic fantasy male characters that I love. Ray and Ren, I believe are their names, if I remember correctly, and they're phenomenal, and I really, really enjoy them. So the fact that I haven't yet read this, even though I've tried to, is a little odd. So I really need to get on this for this year, along with like literally every other new release that has come out this year. Question number 4 is your most anticipated release for the second half of the year. I am very out of touch with what's coming out this year. Also putting together like my list for the second half of the year to share with you guys, and it's not lengthy because I'm unaware of everything that's coming out. So I'm going to need some good recommendations from you guys, please, in the comments down below. My answer was The Hawthorne Legacy by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, which is the sequel to the Inheritance games, which I didn't even have on my list until I read that book. This is a very recent addition to this list. I really enjoyed the Inheritance games. It's like this YA murder mystery scavenger hunt, treasure hunt game. We have this girl who is seemingly untethered to this billionaire, but when he passes, he leaves all this money to her and doesn't give it to his children or his grandchildren. And so when she comes to collect a prize that she's unaware she's getting, there's also a game involved. And so for her to get the money, she needs to pass this game, but she knows nothing about this man. So she enlists the grandchildren to help her. And it's like 4 boys at a very fancy mansion on like the East Coast, and it's like really fun, and there's secrets and family mysteries and murder and scavenger hunts. I loved it. I can't wait for the sequel. Question 5 is the biggest disappointment. I wouldn't say that this was like particularly a disappointment because I didn't go into it with like super high expectations, but it really solidified my feelings, and that is Lore by Alexandra Bracken. We read this for House Salt for February, I believe, and I disliked this book so much that I didn't finish it. I had read like, it was broken into like 5 parts, and I got to the 5th part and there was maybe like 90 pages left. I feel very far away from the camera. There was maybe like 90 pages left, and I could like not give a shit. Like I did not care at all the resolution for the story. So I just like dipped out with 90 pages to go. And I talked about that in the live show. We did a live show for this, and I'll link it on the screen if you want to check it out. We all were very disappointed in this book. It's supposed to be following like this Greek god game that happens every like 7 years, and involves the children of the heroes and like children of the gods, and they're all in these different houses and bloodlines, and they're fighting with each other. And some are mortal. Kind of a mess. The villain was kind of terrible. The twist was kind of terrible. I lost interest very quickly. I felt that a lot of the choices were not well explained, didn't make sense. And I haven't liked anything that I've read by Alexandra Bracken in the past, so I didn't know why I would like this, but I thought I'd give it one final try. I am certain that I do not like her writing or her stories, and will not be reading anything else from her in the future. She seems like a very lovely lady on Instagram, but we are not meant to be. While it was a disappointment, I wasn't necessarily surprised by it. And just like normal fashion, my camera overheated. Now we can continue. Next question is biggest surprise. Ironically, it was Scythe by Neil Shusterman. Not that I thought I wouldn't like this, it's just that I have had really poor luck with YA dystopians. I read everything that was a YA dystopian back when it was cool to read YA dystopian, and then I really didn't like it anymore, and everything I read since then I wasn't enjoying, and it just all felt so recycled and old and like I had read it before. And a lot of the genre was tainted by the bad ones that I read, so I really wasn't super hopeful for this, and I haven't read a book like this in so many years that I was like surprised to see that I could still enjoy this genre. The concept was just so, I feel like, unique and different, or at least his take on it was. It's a society that has conquered everything, including death, but they still need to control the population, so they create these scythes who essentially glean or murder people to keep the population. We have 2 characters, Citra and Rowan, who get taken in as scythe apprentices, and something happens later on in the story that causes them to like diverge onto different paths, and take two very different approaches to the scythedom. And I just really liked seeing the dichotomy and the difference between like these two characters and how they were choosing to use their skill sets and their power and like their place in society. And I feel like you really could have just had a book that was just one or the other. This one had both. We had the two perspectives and we got to see them work with each other and like how they bounced off each other. And I just thought that was very smart and very exciting to read about and very fulfilling to read about. And I'm glad that he chose to take us on both journeys and not just one or the other. And I'm excited to see what happens in the second book. I did really enjoy this. The thing I wasn't a fan of was the romance, which I think is a very common complaint of this particular series. Next question is your favorite new author. It could be a debut or a new to you. So for this one, I put Jen DeLuca, who wrote Well Met, which is a book that I absolutely loved this year. I know that the sequel is a little less well received than Well Met. I can't remember if it's Well Played or like Well Matched. It's the yellow one, right? Yeah. But the first one I really enjoyed. It's about a character who gets involved with a Ren fair. She's playing a tavern wench and she's romancing or supposed to romance this pirate, but the pirate ends up being her like arch nemesis in real life who she can't stand. So the scenes of them in their real lives around town, they're just like shooting each other these evil like disgusted glares and they can't stand one another, but then they put these costumes on and they go to the Ren fair. My camera is really not cooperating with me at the moment. Let's see if we can finish this video. I think we talked about the last one sufficiently, so let's continue with the next question. Your newest fictional crush. That would be Alex Nilsson. Sweet, sweet, and beautiful baby Alex Nilsson from People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. I loved this book so deeply. And I loved Alex Nilsson so deeply. I haven't had like a fictional crush on a character in a book in a really long time, and Alex Nilsson was just, he was so sweet. I liked him so much, and I loved him with Poppy. I loved him for Poppy. Next one is your newest favorite character. This was hard for me to pick one because I really wanted to say like Alex Nilsson from People With Me on Vacation or like Bree and all of the characters from Legendborn. But I really wanted to pick like a different one for each question. So for this one, I chose Lou and Reed and the crew from Serpent and Dove by Shelby Mahurin. I really do enjoy this cast of characters. I think they're super fun and they're very diverse and there's a lot of them. There's a huge cast of characters in this novel, especially in the second novel where we like pick up twice as many as the first one had. There's a very wide range of characters that you're pulling from, and I really enjoyed that. I really like how they all kind of work together but not really, or how they're adversaries and they're competing with each other, and it's just a really fun group dynamic. I love books like this that have these giant group dynamics, especially in fantasy novels, and I'm excited to see like what happens to them in the third book because I finished the second book like yesterday. The next question is a book that made you cry. I think the only thing that made me cry so far this year is Forever Wild by K.A. Tucker, which is a novella. The first book is The Simple Wild, and this is a novella that takes place over Christmas. The Christmas vibes in Alaska, the setting, just it was wonderful. And then the actual plot line of that book was just so happy and so sweet. And this book really like pulled at my heartstrings and really like made a happy tear shed. So no sad tears so much, but like happy tears for sure. The next one is a book that made you happy. People With Me on Vacation by Emily Henry made me insanely happy. I mentioned this earlier. I loved Alex Nilsson and I really enjoyed Poppy. She's a super like fun, eccentric, very like millennial feeling character. Lives in New York, works for this relaxation magazine where she's essentially made to be like a travel blogger and go on all these extravagant vacations and write about them in this very fancy magazine, and it just felt very millennial and I really loved that. I really like loved their dynamic. They were friends and you get to watch them and their friendship throughout like 10 years, and every summer when they get together on these trips, it was just like goals, dreams. I loved her and I related to her so much, and this was just made me very happy. The next question is your favorite book to film adaptation that you've seen this year. I don't think I've seen any book to film adaptations. Nothing comes to mind. And then the last question is what books do you need to read by the end of the year? All of them. A couple that I put down here that I really want to get to are A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas, House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas and Chain of Iron by Cassandra Clare. And I say this because these are 3 massive books and part of massive series. And I fear that if I get too far behind in any one of these series, I will not continue because I will be too overwhelmed with continuing and I will forget what's happened previously. And so I want to stay on top of them. So my goal is to read these 3 books this fall/winter with the hope that then I will be prepared for more later on. So they're like really big commitments and my reading has been really inconsistent this year and lackluster. So I get that this is ambitious, but a girl can dream. And that is it. Those are all of the questions for the mid-year Freakout book tag. I'd like to know if we had any of the same answers or if you had any suggestions for me for new releases. I'd love to know in the comments down below. If you want to follow me on any other platform, my Instagram and Twitter handles are on the screen now. Please come be my friend, chat with me in the comments. We'll have some fun. Thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time, I will talk to you very soon. Bye!